Welcome to the Soar Podcast, the place for creative entrepreneurs with limitless dreams and unconventional stories who want to build healthier, happier, more profitable self-employed businesses. I'm your host, Ray Hyde Cornell. Get ready to soar. Welcome to the Soar Podcast. On today's episode, we have Ericka Saurit. Ericka, tell our listeners what it is you do.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I am an former interior designer, still a designer, turned brand marketing strategist. I focus on the home industry. So that is interior designers, architects, developers, anybody kind of working to build or furnish or design homes. I help them to create brand messaging, brand strategies, identities, anything that has to do with building their business into a brand.
So you really made this pivot, which I think a lot of companies either went through this a little while ago or they're going through this new phase of it now in the post-COVID world of going from this very real world, three-dimensional business to a very virtual and digital business.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
You know, it was a forcing factor. I mean, obviously COVID and it changed everything, and we don't need to go into what that looked like. We all lived through it.
Yeah.
And it became, really essential for all businesses to have very strong brand presence online or, and through some sort of digital or virtual outreach. And that took the form initially of events. Obviously, websites became really important. E-commerce became super important. And how, whether you're on the B2B side or you're on the, B2C or even D2C, engaging with customers and clients in a very real and authentic way became really important, because that digital interface is what set between all of us at the time. Brick-and-mortar shops were closed for, people who buy specifically things from showrooms. And that's just not just the design industry, but anybody who has to kind of, deal with a physical place felt, they really had to pivot their business into an entirely different way of operating. And that brand ideology and that brand strategy and everything that their brand represented, if they hadn't already made the effort to transform it into a kind of virtual entity, then it was time. And my business started in COVID. This Saurit Creative started as a result of, of COVID. And it's been a long and beautiful struggle, as you know, as an entrepreneur. And we can talk about that, but it really started with me reaching out to everyone I had really ever worked with and say, look, I can help you. Tell me what your business struggles are, what your clients and your customers are dealing with, and let's find a way to create a digital marketing and brand strategy that will engage them and keep them customers.
So how did you make that pivot first internally? Because you said that you went and you told everybody externally, hey, this is what I'm doing now. How can I help you? I know I can help, but just tell me where I can help out. But you had to go through those steps internally first to really decide that you were going to change your entire way of working, change your business, change the people that you were serving. You stayed in the same industry, but you really pivoted into a wildly different role. How did you do that from that mental perspective?
I look back on that. I was trying to prepare for this question a little bit because I think sometimes we just jump and don't really think clearly through. I knew what I didn't want, and that was to go and work for I started applying for, other roles. I was thinking maybe so I left the current company that I was with in 2020, and I thought I was going to take a little bit of a break. At the time I was sort of testing and seeing what other roles were available, and the idea of onboarding, of joining a new team, of really kind of entering into this new workforce at any company where everyone was I mean, super distracted by what
Yeah.
was happening in their personal life and in the world. And there was so much uncertainty. And the idea of kind of going into a working environment with those conditions just felt wrong to me.
Mm.
So, internally and intuitively felt like it just didn't feel right. And so you know, I did what I said. I just started reaching out to say, like, perhaps maybe I could do freelance for a while. Maybe I could, just sort of go on my own and see what that looked like. I had, just as a little backstory, I lived in Asia for many years. I worked as a designer there, as an interior designer, and did part of the crossover into the marketing work that I do now. While it started while I was in Asia over 10 years ago. And so while I was there, also, I started a business on the side. And so that was my first jump into entrepreneurship, into owning a business and building a brand. And so I had that experience sort of under my belt, which was terrifying and exhilarating and all the things that come along with being independent or being on your own. So I knew I would have those feelings of, I don't know, I knew I would feel like I would question myself a lot. I knew I would have, a lot of insecurities around, money and, how was I going to make the same amount of money that I was making before, like in tech? And could I do it? And could I still live in the Bay Area, which is where I was living at the time? And something just told me to go for it, to just, try and see, because like I said, the other option was going back to work, like in an actual, for another company. And I thought, it's just going to work. I don't know. It was a little bit of, I don't know. It was maybe a sort of just listening to a voice inside of me that said, this is the right thing. And this is what you should do. So I went for it. Which is maybe hopefully what a lot of people listen to. And then we look back over our shoulder over the years that have gone by and we think, could we have done things differently? Absolutely. If I had to start over again, I think I would get in my own way, because I would try so hard to, the business plan would have to be perfect. Maybe I'd need to have, financial backing more than I had, which was nothing. It was just me. I would really try to set a plan first instead of just acting on it. But I didn't have that option at the time. I just went for it.
So not only did you pivot your role and your business model, but you actually went from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. And I think this is something that so many people dream of. That they dream of being their own boss and setting their own schedule. And yeah, it's scary to have all the responsibility on your shoulders and to be self-sufficient, but how exhilarating and freeing too. But then they go, but I've never done that. I've only ever been an employee. How can I possibly go out on my own, especially when I have no financial backing? And I mean, I was just like you when I started my businesses. I had no investment money. I had no loans or anything like that. It's just, all right, well, let's get started. There's the internet. Let me have at it. And so
I love that.
what advice would you give to people who are feeling that call to break out of the traditional employment mold?
So one advice someone gave me just in that time in COVID was like, listen, time is going to pass, whether you like it or not. And what do you want to have in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years from now? You can either start now and, get through it. Time is still going to happen, whether you like it or not. So in that amount of time, whatever that framework is, that 5 years, 1 year, whatever, wouldn't you like to have started building something now than waiting? And what are you waiting for anyway? And I was like, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. And what am I waiting for? Yeah, I don't live with a lot of regrets in my life. I kind of do things and then, I look back and I say, oh, okay, maybe I could have done it a little bit differently, but do I regret it? Not usually. Taking the chance is always worth it. And yeah, it's a struggle, just like anything else. Nobody ever said having a business or doing your own thing, walking your own path is easy, but it's incredibly worth it. And every day when I wake up and make my schedule and, set my own time and I'm grateful for, the risks that I've taken and the chances that I've been on. It hasn't been easy, but the benefits are mine. And
Yeah.
I do value that.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that, because even though every single person I've ever talked to who runs their own business, is a freelancer, self-employed, whatever you want to phrase it,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has always said, yeah, it's hard, but I would never go back to being an employee ever. Even my husband, who just retired from FedEx back in October, he was like, every once in a while, every 2 or 3 days, he's like, I don't have to be somewhere. Like, I make my own time.
Right.
I'm going to go out to the garage and make something, or I don't know. He has a zillion
Good for
hobbies,
him.
but it's like, that there's so much more pressure on you, but of course that's
Yeah.
self-imposed. I mean,
Yeah.
you set your own goals, you set your own benchmarks. And
Yeah.
so you're the one creating the structure. And if it ever feels like too much, you can uncreate the structure and create a
That's
new
right.
one that's looser.
That's genius. Say that again.
I don't know.
That's
People are
so
going to have
smart.
to hit the rewind button. I don't know what I just said.
No, but
Yeah.
also, you get to control who you work with. So
Yes.
the team, I had a really bad experience with like a bad culture
Mm,
at a company I worked for before. I had a bad manager. I had a bad, the team was amazing, but it was very toxic and everyone was really unhappy.
mm,
The performance was suffering for it. And, it was really difficult. I had never been in that situation, like to this extreme. And I realized, again, when I started my own thing, it's like I get to choose who I work with, including my clients. So I
yeah.
get to make the decision about, what kind of, personalities and teammates and people that I want to work with, so that it can be as joyous and as inspiring and collaborative as I want it to be. And I can solve problems the way I want to solve them. I get to set up the value structure here. I get to determine, what works and what doesn't when it comes to, measuring success. And that's really, really important to me. And unless you've been in that environment, and hopefully it's not something I would wish on anyone, but you don't realize like how important that is to your own, your own mindset,
Yeah.
and how you face your work and what you bring to your job, until, it's unsatisfactory.
Yeah, exactly. And I know anybody who is new to being self-employed, I'm sure, is listening to this going, oh, well, I can't choose who I work with yet. I just have to
Yeah.
take any job that I get. And I mean, I have a bunch of theories around this. Like, the way that you carry yourself and the way that you tell the universe what you're willing to allow and not allow into your life,
Yeah.
it's not as formal as going, oh, okay, so I have these people who are lined up to work with me. I'm going to choose
Mm-hmm.
that one. It's not
Right.
like that. But if you create the atmosphere of what you want to attract in, that will find you. And that's
Yeah.
just been my experience of right now. I have this amazing roster of clients on both sides of the business. And I'm like, how did I even find these people? But they
They found
really
you.
found me. They really did. And the
Yes.
ones that I chased after
Yeah.
early on, those were the ones that ended up being the bad clients. And so it's
Yeah.
just funny how that happens. What was it like for you, especially because you did make such a big pivot professionally? How did
Yeah.
you get to the point where you really could choose who you were going to work with and allow into your world?
Well, it's the same. I shifted my mindset again. I think that happened sometime around 2020, again, when everything was shifting and changing. It was like, you have a choice. You can either be afraid and you can, live in a mindset of fear and doubt and frustration, or you can live in a mindset where no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. No matter what happens, this is going to work. I may not have control over that, what that looks like at the end of the day. But it will always work out for the best. And I think that mindset was what it's still kind of the thing that drives me, just to believe that, and trust in myself and my decision making, and believe that good people are out there. Good people are looking for what I do and what you do, and you will find each other. And it sounds really woo woo. It's not like, it's very difficult to quantify to say something like that, but it's really about believing in, having kind of hope that everything will be okay. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Esther Perel. She's a relationship therapist. She has lots of great, she's written tons of books, and she speaks a lot about kind of relationship dynamics. And one of the things she says, obviously, is that, couples come to her and they don't understand each other. They don't understand, the world, their marriage, whatever, their relationship. But she says the antidote to anxiety is hope. So the idea that you don't really know what's going to happen. This doesn't have to have a religious base to it at all, but the idea that you can trust in yourself and trust in, in the decision making that you do, that this is what I kind of apply to my business. So, and I also ask clients to go on that journey with me too, because, marketing, as you know, is a long game. And though we have systems and processes that, we can measure and we can, determine whether things are working and pivot from that, it takes a step in the direction of hope to believe that a campaign will work, to believe that, right? To believe that marketing is going to help you accomplish your goals. I can't say to my clients, I guarantee anything. But I can say that I have seen this before, and I've got experience, helping many, many, many similar types of designers and companies to do the same, to achieve the same or similar goals. So you have to kind of walk with me on the path of belief, and let's find out together, and let's see what it reveals to us about our business or about our brand or about ourselves.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. It does come down to trust. And I think it comes down to, like we said before, choice. And there's this
choice. Yes.
Phrase that always kind of sticks out in my mind. And I forget who said it. This was not me, but the phrase is, why don't you shift your question from why is this happening to me to why is this happening for me? And when you make that shift, you're going from that victim mentality to this mentality of being a receiver of some kind of gift, some kind of lesson or wisdom that something outside of you is imparting for you. And I think it's that framework, that mindset change that allows us to look at these incredibly challenging obstacles as really blessings.
Opportunity.
Yes.
I love that so much.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, that's perfect.
There's so much more I want to ask you, particularly around your branding work and your niche industry. So we're going to take a super short commercial break, and then we're going to dive into that.
Sounds great.
Hey, Ray here. Ever wish this whole creative self-employment thing was easier? Like, wouldn't it be nice if there was, I don't know, a step-by-step guide for building a successful freelance business? You know where I'm going with this, right? That guide does exist. Back in the day when I first started out hustling and side gigging, I wish I had a roadmap to fast-track my way to self-employed success. So I made one for you. No matter where you are in business, I guarantee you this guide can help you get to the next stage faster, and the next, and the next. Whether you're still deciding if ditching the W-2 is right for you, or if you're struggling with your pricing, business formation, client acquisition, sales, or even health insurance, this guide has everything you need. Get your free copy of the complete guide to building a successful freelance business at chironconsulting.us/guide. And we're back with Ericka Saurit. So Ericka, you are a branding expert, and in particular, you are in the interior design, kind of like home furnishings, home products industry. Do I have that right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So this is one of those things where when some people niche into an industry, there is this potential for them to start seeing it as lackluster because it becomes so familiar to them. And when they're surrounded and immersed in that world for so long, then they kind of stop seeing the novelty and ingenuity of it. And from someone who knows absolutely nothing about your industry, I might look at that industry and go, okay, so all of the furniture stores that I know of, like the Home Store and Ashley and Bob Mills, they're all furniture. And I have a hard time when I think of branding, I think of something very distinct and very like packed with personality. But this industry, for me on the outside looking in, doesn't seem like it has so much personality. So how have you brought that branding expertise and that infusion of color, no pun intended, to this industry?
Yeah. So great question. I will say, so the home industry is very broad. It's huge, right? It's like saying the banking industry or the healthcare industry, right? You know that there are, I mean, in healthcare, there's like insurance, there's specific practitioners, there's like, you can go very deep into what, encompasses that entire industry. The home industry is the same. So mostly I work with interior designers who are working specifically with clients, either mostly residential clients who are building or, renovating a home. But I also work with architects who are building homes. I work with home furnishings manufacturers. So they are making, anything you can think of, from furniture, and that's like, sofas and seating, to, things made of wood. They would call them like case goods, storage things, carpets, rugs, art, like anything literally in your home is part of that home furnishings industry. And there's multiple ways to buy now. You can buy exclusively online, like a direct to consumer brand that's only going to sell. They don't have any showrooms, right? They're just a digital brand. There are brands like that hybridize themselves, like CB2 or West Elm, where now they have physical stores, but you can buy also online. They have really strong brands because they're focused on selling directly to a consumer, but they also have a business where they sell to interior designers who then sell back to their clients. So there's sort of a B2B and a D2C. So I work with larger brands like that already have really an identity, a personality, a brand established. But then when it comes to, there's sort of additional sides of that. So let's say there's like perhaps a locally owned furniture store, in your neighborhood or in your city, that might be owned by an independent owner who wants to distinguish themselves, differentiate themselves from those larger brands that, sell either higher volume, they can get better prices. There's a lot of business, issues around that. But maybe they particularly sell antiques, or they sell a certain style of home furnishings or a certain kind of price point. Again, there can be many, many ways I look at that. So I work with them as well to help them create a brand for themselves. But amongst all of these different types of clients, from the interior designer to the manufacturer who's just going to be selling directly back to that designer or to that retailer, right, as kind of a wholesale partner, or to the retailer, like I said, the smaller kind of independent retailer, each of them stands to benefit from building their business into a brand. And I would say this is true for anybody, any kind of business, whether you're a solopreneur, like a personal brand, which is very, popular right now for influencers online. They're sort of building up their brand as a person or personality. Interior designers are the same. If at any moment when you open Instagram, you'll see, images of spaces of homes or restaurants or shops or whatever that have been designed by interior designers. So the idea is that from my point of view, for my business, how do you create a differentiated identity online? How do you stand above others who are offering a similar style or a similar, price of service or type of, sofa or chair. How
Yeah.
do you create a brand for yourself so that you can build a sustaining business over time? And that's
And
kind of the crux of what my business is about.
but the added layer of challenge, I should say, is that you are also working with established brands. You're working with companies that already
Yeah.
exist. And, I always go back to analogies involving writing because that's what I've been doing my whole life. But it's
Mhm.
often harder for me to edit a piece of content that's been written by someone else half-assedly or poorly
Mhm.
than it is to just start from scratch and create something brand new. And so, how do you approach this upgrade of taking an existing brand and transforming it into something that's still recognizable as that original brand so it doesn't lose its continuity and its history?
Mhm.
And yet, you're creating something new and exciting that is capturing people's attention and making them go, oh, there's something going on over there. I think I want to learn more about that.
So really good brands have done several things really well. So I kind of start from the same place with whether it's an established brand or it's a brand building, like someone who wants to
Mm.
become a brand, whether that's a designer themselves or that's like I said, a retailer or a wholesaler. If their intention is to become a brand, there's sort of three steps. The first one is, and I call this is an E3. I'm Ericka, so each of them start with an E, so you can remember. The first one is that thing that makes you extraordinary. Established brands have this figured out. They know exactly whether it's, Nike versus Adidas,
Mhm.
whether it's, like a watch brand like Panerai versus Swatch. They have determined what it is about their particular business that is differentiated and extraordinary and unique. And same for personal brands or, solopreneurs or design brands or anybody, right? There's something about you that when given a benchmark against similar, and I'll just keep saying designers because that's my market. But when someone is comparing you and isn't able to make a difference, then you're not differentiated, right?
Mhm.
You're not able to stand apart. But good brands have already kind of figured out what that is. The second E is the idea of emotional. Like, have you been able to understand your buyer, understand whether that's a customer, it's like a
Mhm.
retail or B2C, D2C, that customer or the client, do you understand what is their core motivation for purchasing from you, whether a service or a product? What is it? It's not just that I need a watch or I need a sofa or I
It's
need
not
a no.
super logical.
Yeah, it's always something else. And so I've determined that there's five core motivations from the design, home furnishings, home
Mhm.
design, interior design standpoint that drive people to make a psychological choice. And if you look around at everything around you right now, from your microphone to your headphones to what you're wearing to what you might be drinking out of a cup of coffee, perhaps, how you got to where you are in your particular car. Every choice of things that you've made a purchase decision about has been influenced by the brand and by the story that that brand is telling you. And it's been enough that it is driving loyalty to that thing. I will say maybe a particular device or computer.
Mm.
It's like loyalty to a particular shoe you're wearing. You're going to, you're consuming the stories that have been created by that brand based on that emotional or that core motivation. So you do established brands understand that. They've done it through research. They've done it through, all kinds of metrics on purchase decision, and perhaps they've done it through, observation. But every good brand understands that core emotional driver of their client or their customer. That's the second E. The third E, now, if I'm working with an established brand, this is where I can begin to support them. But on kind of new brands, this is something that we work on really closely. It's experience. How does that brand story or that brand strategy or that brand experience translate into a touch point that will engage the customer or the client throughout the entire buying process? And that buying process starts when they think about having a problem that you can fix, right? I need a new phone. Okay. I need a new computer. I need a new car. I need to renovate my home, or I think I want to renovate my kitchen, but it turns out, I think I need to kind of buy a new refrigerator, but it turns out I need to renovate my entire kitchen. And then there's a deeper emotion usually behind that. And it's something potentially about having to do with maybe wanting to entertain or wanting to, impress the neighbors or wanting to sell the home or whatever. As an emotional cause. So how then will you create a brand experience or a brand story throughout every single touch point from, again, getting to know you as a designer or a manufacturer, all the way through the time that, the home has been delivered, it's been completely renovated, the photos have been taken, your client moves back in. How do you follow up with them? Does that experience match your brand ideology, your brand ethos? And so for established brands, it usually comes down to how do we start to create interesting or novel or new or innovative ways to create new engagement along that experience timeline. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And I love this E3 model. And I think it's something that, you're giving us a lot of examples in the context of interior designers and, home furnishing companies that, sell the actual product, sell the refrigerator that I might put in my kitchen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this model still extends to individuals who run our own businesses. You went through this process. Did you put yourself through this same process when you were, okay. So then in that case, tell me, there needs to be some additional mental ninja move that has to happen when you do this for yourself, because I know when I'm doing copywriting for myself, it is not nearly as good as when I do it for someone else. And I think it's because
it's close to it.
Right. We're too close to it. And we also, even those of us who tend to be very confident in our abilities and can even kind of be, our biggest cheerleaders on the outside to clients when we're trying to sell someone our services, internally, sometimes we're just far too humble. And that's to the detriment of us figuring out what is truly unique about us. What is my differentiator? What makes me different? And for me personally, I wouldn't have figured out that it's my psych background unless I paid attention to the way that clients responded to me when they asked me a question. This really happened for me when someone asked me, so do you have a degree in marketing? And I got all nervous and I was just honest. And I said, no, I don't have a degree in marketing. My degrees are actually in psychology. And I was expecting click. I was expecting them to hang up and they didn't. They go, oh, really? That's really interesting. And they leaned in. And that's when I realized that that was my differentiator. But I wouldn't have been able to figure that out myself. I had someone else to reflect that back to me. So with your E3 model, how do you do that for yourself? If you're trying to up-level your brand, what kind of, I just keep thinking like mental ninja move do you need to do to be able to do that for yourself?
So one thing I would recommend is to, probably either whether you've been in business for a long time or you're just getting started, who your competition is, or it's not always competition, it's competitive alternatives. And sometimes that competitive alternative is like, I'll do it myself, right?
Right.
So like DIY, designers are up against that. Or Canva.
Yes.
Exactly. So what you should do is make several columns and put yourself in one of them and list everything that everything you bring to, I would do this for several different ways. I would do this for yourself, like your background. And I would make in each of those columns, like yourself, your maybe 2 or 3 top competitive alternatives. And those can be, other providers or whatever industry you're in, or other, types of stores or whatever, put those in a column. What you bring to this, like your background, your education, your heritage, where you grew up, your educate, like all the experiences, maybe your accreditations, maybe you've gotten, multiple courses you've taken, or maybe things like you're into, competitive tennis, or you do all those things. List them all, right? Because they're all relative. And then do the same for, perceived. In some cases, you'll know them because you can see them in their marketing, but in some other ways, you might have a personal experience with that brand or whatever. So list all those in a column. And then I want you to go through and just sort of cross out everything that's the same. And you'll start to see what your differentiators, what your extraordinary, what is going to make you extraordinary lined up next to them. And then go through and do that for your service offerings. Like, what is it that you offer? And put those next to your competitors, your competitive alternatives, and cross through the things that are the same and start to highlight, put a circle around those things that you do that are different. Now, this isn't to say that's what you lead with, especially in your services. But if you're starting to see a pattern where you can't quite differentiate yourself, and if you can't do that, chances are your clients or customers can't do that either. So you need to halo those things that really, really do strike a balance between what you really want to focus on. Not that the competitive tennis thing is really relevant, but perhaps if,
maybe
it might
if
be.
that's what you're really good at and passionate about, maybe that's your niche market. Maybe that becomes your
Potentially.
in because you have that personal experience and passion.
Or you can write a story around how, the rigor of, playing
Mm.
tennis has given you, a certain approach to building your business, something like that. Those, and chances are too, there's going to be another competitive tennis playing client or someone who plays other types of sports who really sees themselves in your story. But if you don't mention it, you can't assume that anyone's ever going to know. You really have to, with this with marketing, and you certainly know this with copywriting, that you have to put it out there. You can't assume that people are going to, do any research or do any background, because people are kind of lazy and they want it all out there for them. And that's really what marketing is supposed to do, is tell the story that you want people to know and you want them to understand.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to start, is to really sort of, make a list and put out there all the things that are relevant to your background, that you, that you are proud of, or that you really may not even thought made you different, but you might turn out that it actually does. But you really need to look at it in relevance to others and your competitors.
And I think that's such a brilliant exercise because it almost tricks the brain. It makes us look at ourselves alongside competitors and competitive alternatives. And we are better able to step outside of ourselves when we have something else to compare ourselves to, as opposed to just sitting there thinking, how am I different? What makes me special? And then that awful, annoying little self-deprecating voice in the back of our head goes, oh, you're not special. You're just one tiny little person. Like, there's nothing unique about you. When you put yourself on that piece of paper, you're putting yourself on the same playing field as the competition that you might tend to think of yourself as beneath. But really, when you start detailing things out, you do. And I think that's such a brilliant exercise.
One more quick example too, and this is something that I do with a lot of young designers who are just getting started just after school. I ask them to make 2 columns. One is, what do you perceive to be positive about your business? And what do you perceive to be negative about your business? And a lot of times the negatives are, well, I don't have a lot of experience, or I'm just getting started. It's just me. And again, that can be for people further on in their career too, but that you can turn into or spin into a positive, right? Because one of you has time to, completely devote to a particular client or to a customer. So take those positives and negatives too, and know that there's always something. Everybody has their own relevant, unique, extraordinary part.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is those things that we think as negatives about ourselves, like, again, my example of, oh, I don't have a marketing degree. If you're thinking, oh, I'm too new to this, or I'm too young, or nobody's going to take me seriously because I'm, a 22-year-old starting my own business. Well, put that positive spin on it. Think, one, you have a fresh perspective that is going to
Exactly.
be innovative naturally without trying to force it. You have no
Right.
prior experience for a client to go, oh, you're just duplicating what you did for that other
Doing the same
client.
thing again and again. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also, especially if you are younger or if you're coming from a different sector, like you went from this very
Right.
three-dimensional brick and mortar operation to more of the digital virtual world, but you can
Mhm.
bring that expertise in. Younger people can say,
Yes.
I'm more attuned to this younger audience, this younger generation
Absolutely.
who you're trying to reach as a new customer base. There's always a way
Yeah.
to turn something that you think is a negative into a positive.
You nailed it. That's perfect. Well said.
Well, Ericka, if people want to learn more about you, where can they check you out?
Yeah, they can find me on my website. It's Saurit Creative, Saurit creative.com. I have several different resources there. I also have a free brand audit that people can do. Just download specifically from that website. It's sauritcreative.com/ brand audit, all one word, and you can put all of your brand messaging all on one page and take a look and see how effective it is at once. There's instructions on how to do that. And then, of course, on Instagram at Saurit Creative. At Saurit Creative. So there's all kinds of ways to find me, all kinds of courses and workshops and ways to work together. Or you can just reach out and book a discovery call, and I'm happy to chat about nearly everything. So reach out.
Well, we will put all of those links in the show notes. And I will also add, you have an
Thank you.
amazing newsletter that I subscribe to. And even though I'm not in the
Thank you.
home furnishings industry, I find your newsletter so inspiring. You are so creative and you have such a way
Thank
of
you.
niching and speaking to your audience that I just think is very rarely done so well. So everybody go sign up for
That
Ericka's
makes my
newsletter.
day.
It's a
Thank
great
you.
example of something very well done that you can use to reach out to your target market. So thank you so much for being here, Ericka.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ray. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Hey, Ray here again. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcasting platform. Want to be a guest on the show or know someone who has an amazing story of entrepreneurship? Apply on our website at chironconsulting.us/podcast.